Here at Stories of Hope, Kerry Atherton's mission is to give people a platform to share their stories of hope with the world. We also want to provide the same chance to businesses that are passionate about mental health and want to support the podcast. If you'd like to partner with Stories of Hope and advertise your services on this podcast, send a message to kerry@empowerlifesolutions.com.au with your details. Now, on with the episode. In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Stories of Hope Worldwide, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Stories of Hope Worldwide. I'm Kerry Atherton and I'm your host. And today's guest is Tim Smith. Tim's lived an amazing life, full of ups and downs, adventure, loss, grief. But today he's going to be sharing his story of hope. Welcome, Tim.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Tim. So I saw you on the big screen on television for the first time, Married at First Sight, but we're not going to talk much about that. I want to hear about your life because there's so much more to it, including being a drug smuggler, the loss of many family members, PTSD trauma, getting back up again after hard times, resilience and hope. So take us to where you want us to start, Tim.
Oh God, I just finished that big 70-part series. So that went for a while. Look, I guess
You grew up in central Queensland, didn't you? Let's start there.
I grew up in central Queensland, God, little mining town, and movies always played a massive part, in central Queensland because it was so hot. You always sat inside on the weekends. People think that living in Queensland, you're outside, but in the middle of summer, you can't do anything. So you watch movies and I always wanted to travel overseas to somewhere where there were trees and it was cooler. So I traveled over to Canada. I went around, did the backpacking thing, and I ended up falling in love with Canada and met somebody. And a couple of years later, I think I immigrated to Canada. I was about 21, maybe 22 is when I actually came back. And then I decided with my girlfriend at the time, what turned out to be my wife, that we would move back to Canada. And the parents were really quite aged. And so she wanted to go back to spend some time with them before they went. And so we went back. And thus the start of one crazy ride.
Wow. I've been watching your clips and that was something that made me reach out to you.
Right. I led a pretty normal life in my 20s, although Canada was really hard to integrate into. There's no question there. And I eventually just made up a fake resume and got a job in a bar just to have some work over the winter because I did construction. And I still remember trying to be a bartender when I wasn't a bartender. It was a very painful learning curve but I always played off the Australian thing. Oh, that drink's mostly made different in Australia than here. How do you make it here? Because I heard a really good quote the other day that if you were born before 1998, you were pre-Google.
Yeah, true.
So you couldn't look something up on your phone. It all had to be up here or in a book. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't cheat then, did we?
No. So it was pre-Google. And I guess the bartending led me into a better bartending gig, and eventually, it was a breakdown in my marriage. But I was flipping houses in the United States. I was working construction. I was bartending, and it just got a bit much for the marriage. So we separated, and I guess I just had a normal life. Small kid from central Queensland, and I end up meeting some very big underworld figures, and I got to know them over a couple of years.
They were underworld figures at the time.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Probably exciting to you, wasn't it? Because you grew up in a town with 800 people.
Totally. It was something out of this world, all the cars and the money, but I was still working as a bartender for them. They owned the nightclub that I worked at.
Right.
It was just their play toy, that nightclub. And then one night after work, they just started talking about like getting drugs across the border into the US. And it'd be great if somebody knew how to fly a helicopter. Well, I didn't know how to fly a helicopter, but just like the bartending, I thought, throw caution to the wind. And I said, I reckon I could do it because I operated heavy equipment at the time. So I went and took a 1 hour, it wasn't even 1 hour, I think it was a half an hour introductory flight the next day. And then I went to work the next night and said, yeah, I think I can do this. 5 weeks later, I was flying a 206 Bell Jet Ranger loaded with drugs south with no license, no experience. Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
It-
You always been a risk taker?
Yeah, I think so. That was the ultimate risk taking because
It was.
there was a real chance of dying. And I remember my co-pilot, which was just a friend of mine, the first morning that I took him up in that helicopter, because I went and picked it up by myself. And I almost killed myself that day. I forgot to turn the fuel pumps on in the helicopter. So when I took off, lucky it had a triple system because I didn't realize that I hadn't turned the fuel pumps on, which lucky it has that triple system. Yeah, that morning he said, are we going to die? And I said, I don't know. It's a 50-50. Like, I'm just not sure. It's dark. It's cold. I don't know how to fly this thing. And we're going somewhere where I don't know where we're going. I just hope everything goes all right. But if you want to get out, get out. I understand if you don't.
Oh, that's such a crack up. Were you scared?
Petrified.
You sound like you weren't, but you were. So that's
Petrified. And it was about -20 that day. So that's how cold it was. Yeah. So and we didn't know how to work the heater in the helicopter. We didn't, and it was dark and we're heading into something you see on National Geographic. There is no place to land. I'm turning transponders off. So nobody's going to come and rescue you if you go down. Nobody's going to know where we are. It's a death run. Yeah. But we didn't talk much on the way down. Once we actually picked up the load, we actually had to fly somewhere else and pick it up. And then once we picked it up, then I don't know, something changed. We didn't speak. It was just so stressful. The winds were really bad. I got lost. I was running short on fuel. We couldn't find the landing spot. A lot of things went wrong that day. But we eventually found the spot, delivered. And then on the way back, it was euphoria. It was a drug. The drug was the adrenaline that you got from it.
And that's very addictive, isn't it?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the money. It was just, and over time, when you're doing something very few people can do or should do or would do, your confidence or I was never arrogant. I remember at a meeting with a bunch of big hierarchies and them telling me, you've cancelled a few times because of weather. And I just threw the keys over the table and said, it's people that could kill you in a second. And just said, well, if you think it's so effing easy, then you do it. Knowing that, if you're going to shoot me or do anything, nobody gets anything across. So this air comes about you of confidence, I guess, or stupidity.
Did you think that they'd listen and go and do it themselves, or did you think that they possibly could shoot you?
Oh, I went to one meeting once. We had over $1 million worth of stuff go missing. The US had seized, and they seized all the records, so we couldn't prove that the US government had it. And so over time, this Vietnamese gang asked for a meeting, and I went to the meeting with 3 others, and they had 9 guns pointed at us, and I just made it really simple that if you killed me, I didn't worry about the other 3. You can kill them. But if you killed me, this thing ain't going to fly because it's really hard to find a helicopter pilot to do what I do. And I wasn't a helicopter pilot, so it's really hard to find anyone to do what I do.
Wow. So you felt invincible,
Totally.
but how long did it all last? Because you got caught pretty early, didn't you?
No, it didn't last long at all. It lasted 3 or 4 months.
Did you think that you would get caught, or did you feel that invincible that you thought, oh no, I'm not going to get caught. This is just going to keep going forever.
No, I used to get a lot of deja vu. Deja vu, I don't get it as much anymore, but I used to get it a lot when I was younger. And I always knew I'd end up in prison.
Oh wow, did you?
Yeah, but it was really weird when I found myself there. I mean, it's a scary place, especially US prisons. You know, you're thousands of kilometers from home. You're isolated. It's yeah. I knew it was a very high risk of possibly getting caught. Yeah, and not getting caught doing it. That's impossible. But somehow getting ratted on, which ironically enough is how I got caught. I never got caught doing it. I got spotted actually, but I didn't get caught in the act. Yeah.
So, Tim, can you tell us about the day that you were arrested?
Yeah, the day was, lots of emotions. I flew back from Australia. I got that phone call that my mum was actually dying, and it was just a weird phone call. And again, deja vu. I dreamt it a couple of hours before I got that phone call, and then I was on a plane, came back to Australia. I was only back here about 7 days. Mum started to get a little bit better. I was getting a lot of pressure from back there, and I knew that I'd have to sort of help Dad and my brother through it. So I thought I said I'd fly back to Canada for 2 days and tie up what I needed to tie up and then fly back. And look, my brother and dads knew that I was up to something. They didn't know what, but they weren't happy about it. But I just assured them that everything would be all right. And then when I boarded that plane and landed in LA, yeah, I remember the pilot saying, "Can everyone have their passports ready at the door?" Which was a little bit strange, but I didn't cotton on. And then when I got to the door, it was like time had stood still because they just handed the passport to somebody with a blue jacket, and then I looked, and there were about 20 agents, and they said, "Welcome, Mr. Smith. We've been waiting for you."
Wow,
So
20 agents to do that.
they don't know, and that's the US. They want to show force, and they want to show that they're not mucking around, and they did that.
And so what happened after that?
I spent about 6 hours at the airport waiting, I guess, and yeah, that was a bit of a funny one. I said, I need to talk to a lawyer because that's what I'd seen on the movies. And they said, okay, from this point on, we're not going to speak to you. And then it was handcuffs on, and then they just explained what's going to happen. They're going to walk me out into LAX and get me in a car. And then if I tried anything, I remember the agent going, "I'll fuck you up." And I said, okay, no worries. I'm in handcuffs and you guys are all around me. It's not like I'm going to punch my way out of this. And then just did the car ride. I had an agent either side of me and then two in the front. And they were just talking about going to Mexican. I'm in Los Angeles. I love Mexican food. I thought we were going to a hotel. They said they would go back to the hotel and have a shower and then go get some food. I'd never been in jail. I'd never been in trouble. So I didn't understand what was about to happen. But I remember wheeling around the corner and I just said, "Where are we?" And they go, "We're at jail." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I thought they go, "Yeah, dickhead, we're going for food. You're going to jail." And I went, so that was just the realization. I'm getting booked into jail. I got booked into the federal detention center in LA.
Wow.
And that was just, by the time booking always takes a long time. It's the first time you get stripped off. And I think I got to jail at about 11 o'clock that night, got booked in. So by the time I got upstairs to a cell, it would have been about two in the morning. And then you get a call over the intercom at about 4:30 in the morning. They call out your name, and they just say court calls, which is everyone going to court that day. And my name was on it. So you got to get up and get going. So I only had about 2 hours sleep before you had to go through that whole process again of getting, dressed out to go to court for your first day arraigned in court. Yeah.
So as you're sitting in that cell, Tim, what's going through your head?
Obviously my mum was really sick.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether anyone knew where I was. Mum was sick. Obviously, I didn't know. I knew I had 36 counts against me. I didn't know how much they knew. That's the hardest thing to control is your mind. Your mind can run away. Like, I'm never going to get out of here. Like, this is going to be my life forever. I hope I see mum again. Like, just tons of, you just you don't think clearly, and I had a double whammy. Not to mention I was dealing with that, adjusting myself for my first day in jail/prison. And then I was also dealing with, I told them I'd be back in 48 hours. Like I said to Dad, I'll be back in 2 days. And yeah, I'm just hoping to get to court. And still, I thought I could work this out and still make my deadline, but that wasn't to be. Yeah.
Had you often talked your way in and out of things through your life? So was that a special gift of yours?
No, I had no confidence growing up. I was dyslexic. I was bullied at school. I wasn't very confident. I hated that small town just because I didn't play contact sports. So I don't know. Everyone in Central Queensland's always the macho, play football, do this, do that, and that just wasn't me. And so I didn't have that confidence. I only got it traveling and getting out of that small town and putting myself in positions that I had no other choice but to do well or to talk my way in of it or talk my way out of it. And I guess that didn't happen till later in life. Yeah.
As you hear this story, what Kerry's discussing might be resonating strongly with you. Perhaps you've experienced something similar yourself and are looking for support. Kerry Atherton is an experienced counsellor and wellbeing coach and has private sessions available if you or someone you know needs some help. You don't have to deal with trauma, addiction, PTSD, and abuse alone. If you'd like to talk about today's episode or your own experiences, book a session with Kerry at empowerlifesolutions.com.au or check the link in the show notes and embrace a future filled with hope. Now back to the episode.
So you talked about being bullied, and I can really identify with that. Do you think that you were trying to prove something to yourself, or was it more of an escape?
Yeah, I mean, I left school at 14. I got permission from the education department. I didn't have to go back. It wasn't just the kids that were bullying. The teachers were horrific. And I've often said, if any of the teachers ever see me or listen to me, and I remember 3 or 4 of their names, you're horrible people. You actually had a lasting effect on me from grade 5, what you did. It wasn't abuse, sexually, but just the mental abuse that you put me through. Some 45 years later, I still think about that. And you're a horrible person, to actually do that to children just because I couldn't read, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what, but I look at them. They had to be miserable people to treat kids that way. So, yeah, I left school early and then I always wanted to fly. I remember applying to the Air Force and I sent my grades in. They sent me back a letter saying I could be a postman or a cleaner.
Oh,
And ironically enough, 12 years later, the exact aircraft I always dreamed of flying, I was actually flying. I was flying without any school or any knowledge of aviation to what I should have been doing. Yeah.
Jean, if it had been in a different industry, that would have been like the perfect dream come true.
Right. I did take lessons after the fact and during that time period. And my instructor who owns the heli school, who I'm still friends with today, always said, I was naturally gifted at flying. Now, I got a job in the mines operating that big equipment. And I remember my grandfather just saying to me, tell them that you know how to operate. Tell them you know. And I didn't know how to operate. My grandfather just said, say you know how to do it. Say you know how to do it. And I just walked into that interview and said, I know how to operate. And I got a job as an operator. It was one of the best jobs I've had. And that's sort of tell them you can do it.
So the true master of fake it till you make it.
100%. No question.
So, Tim, you're in jail, not knowing what's going to happen. Your mum's sick. And what happened after that? And how long were you in jail for?
I was in jail for about a year and a half. I got about a year and a half, but it takes up a big part of it. It's a very much a mental game being in jail, especially over there. I had a call from my brother about a month later. I don't know how he tracked me down. I think I was in New Mexico in some prison there. And yeah, I got a call to the warden's office and I went down and Dave's on the other end of the line and had a talk to him and no, it must be only 5 minutes. And he just said, how you doing? I said, good. I said, how's mum? And he said, yeah, she's good. And I said, is she okay? And he goes, yeah, she's okay. And she'd been gone for 3 weeks by that point. She'd passed away. But he never told me that. He just said, stay strong. Don't let anyone mess with you. And I'll be there when you get out. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know mum had died for about 9 months. I got a letter from dad. I never spoke to anyone on the phone after that. I just did my time and I don't know, I just didn't want to burden anyone. That's the way I wanted to do it.
And you knew you'd be out like within about a year or something?
No, you didn't. I didn't know that till about 4 months before I got out. Is it takes that long to get sentenced. It takes
Oh.
almost a year for you to go through the process.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. And then finally, when I did get sentenced, I only had about 4 months to do before I got out. Well, then I went to immigration. They kind of screwed me there for a while, left me there for about another 4 months. But yeah, I got a letter about 9 months in, and my dad didn't, he wasn't great with words, and he didn't go, oh, I've got something really bad to tell you. It was on the second page, third paragraph, and he just said, your mum's estate's been hard to deal with. And that's how I found out mum had died.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a tough day. But, in jail, it's a funny thing. When you find out that, like, everyone in the unit knew that my mum had died. So, I had some of the biggest, baddest organised crime, whether it was the national president for the Hells Angels, the guys in the mafia, guys in the Nazi lowrider, like lots of gang leaders came up and, gave me a hug and just said, it'll be the hardest time you ever do. That's supermax time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like, that moment in the middle of such turmoil and despair to have that connection in a place like that?
Yeah, isn't it? There's some terminology for it when you're bonded by trauma. We're all in there fighting our cases. We're all, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you were on the streets. We're all the same in there. We're just a number. So you are bonded in there to a degree that you feel like these guys are your brothers. You just do. That's why jail's so easy to go back the second time, because of how you feel about everybody. It's a different place. You just form these really tight bonds in there because of the situation that you put in. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually counselled a lot of people that have been in jail and interviewed people that have as well, and they've said the same thing, that it's hard when you get out because you just feel so different to everyone else.
You do.
So easy to go back.
Very easy to go back. I've never been back a second time. It'd be so easy just because, the first time is all the fear of the unknown. But once you know, it's not as scary. And that's unfortunately what makes it easier. And knowing that you had some good times in there, and knowing that, yeah, I can see why people go back so easily.
Was there ever a time in that jail that you feared for your life?
No. You're just uncomfortable when we'd have shakedowns, the units would get shaken down, or sometimes you just wish you had your own space, just a little bit of space, because you're always in a unit, always in a two-man cell, never went outside. There was no outside rec time for the units I was in. So I never saw the sun for over 12 months.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember you saying that. So tell me about the time you saw your first sunrise in 12 months.
It was really weird. I was walking around immigration. I'd been in immigration about 3 or 4 days. And I remember the guard in the center, they have these new guards, like one guard looks after about 100 guys. And I just remember them calling up saying, whoever wants to go to the yard, sign the sheet at the front for 2:00. And I remember walking up to the guard and couldn't understand what it said. Like, what do you mean go outside, like the yard? What is there, a concrete chamber or something? He goes, no, there's a yard outside. And I said, what, like outside with grass? And he goes, yeah. I said, is there a roof? And he said, no, it's a yard. I just understand, dickhead, it's outside. And I said, yeah, I'll sign up for that in a heartbeat. So I signed up for it. And yeah, when they cracked that door and I walked out onto the grass for the first time, it was crazy. It was awesome. It was just, I laid on the grass and I just rubbed the dirt in my hands. And yeah, it was weird. It was weird because it's only been about 14 months of just not being outside. But I mean, if you spend 14 months inside your house, you go a little stir crazy.
Oh, yeah, you get cabin fever, don't you?
Or spend 14 months inside your bathroom and then see how you go.
Yeah, and I mean, it's those little things, isn't it? No matter where we are or what's going on, but those little things that everyone takes for granted when they're taken away.
Yeah.
And it's so golden, aren't they, when you get to experience them again after so long?
Yeah, but, I've always said prison's not a physical game, it's a mental game. They've got a big prison up in Northern California called Pelican Bay. They have the biggest SHU unit in all of America. And you can go into the SHU just being a gang leader. That's a state prison, not a federal prison. They're very different. And, I've seen interviews where those guys haven't been outside in 20 years, and they're still sane, but it does drive you a little bit loopy. We worry about sitting, with the winter when we don't see the sun. And you're going through all 4 seasons and not seeing it. It does. You've
Yeah.
got to train your brain.
So tell us about the day you were released.
Look, I had 2 releases. Essentially, I was very happy to leave prison and completely ecstatic. But I was picked up by immigration and then just taken to another prison, not realizing. And I thought I'd only be there for a couple of days. I ended up being there for 4 or 5 months. Essentially, the US tried to get some extra time out of me by just leaving me in limbo in federal detention and immigration detention, which essentially is just another prison. And until I eventually got the Australian government involved, which I'd never wanted to get them involved before. And they said they would get me travel documents because the US said they'd lost my passport. But the next day they found it and I was on a plane home. Yeah, it was strange. I flew from there to South Korea. I was picked up by the police in South Korea. I thought I was going to be arrested there. Not that I've done any business there, but they were just looking, the US had just let them know to transfer me and not let me stay. And then transferred with the police onto another plane and then off to Sydney. My girlfriend at the time had talked to my dad and had arranged domestic tickets from Sydney to Rockhampton. And that's, I was excited, but I knew I was coming home. I had some emotional stuff to deal with because mum was
Yeah.
gone. I hadn't spoken to dad in almost a year and a half. The last time I spoke to him, I said I'd see you in 48 hours. And
Yeah, that's right.
all this time had passed. And so, I guess the excitement we wore off once I hit Australia. I waited in Sydney and then flew up to Brisbane, and then I had one flight up to Rockhampton. So I got into Rockhampton, and it was weird. I didn't want to get off the plane because I didn't want to face what I had to face. But little did I know that was only the half of it. So I got off the plane, walked in, couldn't see my dad, and then I walked past him. He walked past me. I had a big beard and long hair, and he'd gotten really old in the last year and a half. He was on a walker, and
Oh, wow. What a
we
shock.
both just looked so different.
Yeah.
Gave him a hug. We never said a word. I don't think we said anything from there to the house. I had a cry in the car, and he said, "You'll be all right." And I think that's the only thing we said for that drive from north side of Rocky to the south side, or south side to the north side, I should say. And then we got into the house, and he just said, "I need you to sit down." I said, "No, I know that she's gone. She's not here anymore." He goes, "No, I've got some really bad news for you." He said that my little brother had taken his life 5 months earlier,
Oh,
Christmas Eve that year. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
wow. What a shock.
The Dave wasn't there anymore. Yeah.
Was Dave the one that rang you in?
Dave was the one that called me. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
We actually asked, my lawyer came and see me in November and said, "Hey, your brother wants to come and see you." And I said to him, "Look, just tell him I'm okay. Tell him I'm doing all right. I don't want him to spend the money." I didn't want to put anyone out. I didn't want him to waste his time. I'm in Supermax. I can only get a 1-hour visit a week or 2 hours a week, that max. So he came for 2 weeks. The most I could see him was maybe 3 or 4 hours. I just thought it's a long way to come, a lot of money just to, but yeah, he killed himself 3 weeks later.
Wow.
I think the poor bugger needed him to see me, not me to see him, So
We never know that, do we? We never know what else is going through. Or you said that your dad didn't deal well with emotions. Was he one of these guys that was like, you just toughen up, you eat cement, you don't talk about the hard stuff?
yeah, look, what's happened over the last couple of years, Dad wouldn't have been the best person if you're dealing with depression, or Dave and Mum were very close. I was very close to Dave, and unfortunately, my dad was useless when it comes to dealing with that.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't the person to talk to about it. And he would have just said, "Oh, unfortunately, my dad sort of played the victim." And this is what I say to people is, although over the years, dad would always say, you don't know what I've lost. I lost my life. We're all kids at the end of the day. We're just kids that are 50. This is the time for you to step up. We didn't ask to be born, but this is the time for you to say, and all those years afterwards, dad never said, how are you doing? I actually tried to end my life in 2018. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stood on the back of a car in a building and had a rope around my neck, and I just thought if I step off, everything goes away, you know. And then I watched a couple of docos, and they say wait 10 seconds, and that 10 seconds mostly feels like 10 hours because everything you've done, experienced, said, and felt goes through your brain. I just remember just trying, but if I had slipped, there was no coming back. I was on the back of a tow hitch and trying to stand on the ball. And if I had have stepped off, that was it. And I just remember just sitting on, I don't know whose trunk of the car it was. It was in a building I was living at and just bawling. And then eventually took the rope down and just sat down there for hours, just crying. And I eventually I had to go get help that day. I had a friend that I told, and she told me the police were coming to get me, or I could go to the hospital myself. And I went. And it's I had a thought process, but I called dad from hospital and I said I'm in a bit of trouble, and he just said, look, I can't listen to this. Call me when you're better. I don't think he was a mean person.
He just
He
didn't
wa-
know how to emotionally
he
connect.
didn't know how to deal with it, and I
Yeah.
do think slightly he was a bit of a selfish person. Looking
Right.
back,
Yeah.
that it's not always about you, especially when it comes to my little brother. It's not always, this is what I say to parents. I'm not a parent, but I am a child. And I mean that in the funniest way, that we're all kids. And sometimes even being an adult would have been just nice to go, how are you dealing with losing everybody? But it never came, and that's just the way it goes. You move on.
Tim, when you tried to end your life, so I'm just trying to do the time frame here because I'm not sure, but how long after losing your mum and finding out about your brother was that?
Well, it's really weird. I've had all these, I lost Dave and everything. And then, in the next 24 hours of being out of jail, I made 5 phone calls because I hadn't talked to anyone since I'd been in jail. I opened my flip phone back then and looked through. And then I eventually got a hold of my best mate, Terry. And he goes, mate, how are you doing? And I said, I'm all right. And then I told him, I tried to call Adam, tried to call Todd. He goes, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but Adam died last year in a car crash. And then the 5 people I tried to call, 2 had passed away. Adam had died in a car crash, and Chris had taken his own life as well. So in the first 48 hours of being out, like 2 family members and 2 friends that, so I was walking around in Twilight Land. So, a month after that, I said to my dad, I've got to go back to Canada. That's where my life was. That's where, that's just where home was for me. It wasn't Australia anymore. So I did go back to Canada for the next 7 or 8 years until Canada found out that I had a prison record, and then they knocked on my door, and then I paid for the crime again. So they actually started deportation, even though I had a house and I had 2 dogs and I had a life. Yeah, I fought it for a while, but eventually they gave me 10 weeks to pack up my life. So I was deported out of Canada back to Australia. So Australia wasn't home for me. And when I landed back in Sydney, it was brutal. I went from having a beautiful life to just sitting at the airport. Because at that point, I wasn't talking to my dad. He'd done some shitty things to me. I had no friends, no family, nowhere to go. And Canada had taken the money as well. Not the money I'd earned. That was all gone. But I'd built myself back up again. And I had, I came back with nothing. And I guess I just tried to find somewhere to live in Australia. I was living in a backpackers in Pitt Street, working in a concrete recycling plant. I mean, my fall from grace was high and hard. And then eventually I didn't feel Sydney was home. Queensland had too many bad memories. Then I bought an old shitty car from Parramatta Road and drove down to Melbourne, and I slept in that for the next little while and lived at a backpackers for almost a year. And I guess I was just placed. I didn't know what to do. I was 42 too. So I'm homeless at 42. And I did I did get a good job, like a job in real estate, selling real estate, and then a partner left me and I just couldn't make it home. I don't know what was mentally blocking me, but I just felt no matter what, I couldn't shake this thing. And that's why I just thought, what's the point?
Yeah, and I've been at that point when I was 18, when I became totally hopeless due to different circumstances of addiction and trauma, vicarious trauma, which is what you're essentially talking about as well. And I hear it so often that people that want to end their life, they don't necessarily want to die, but they just don't know how to live anymore.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I wanted to die. I mean, I had no friends, had no family.
Nobody that was there for you that you could call on at that time.
No. All my good friends lived back in Canada. And
Yeah.
and I know Australia's a great place. I would never leave it. I've found, I've made it home. It's one of the coolest countries. But I tell you what, it's hard integrating yourself back in here. And I'm not down on Aussies at all. But even just getting an invitation to a barbecue, it's fucking tough these days. Social media is not, there's nothing social about it. We sit in our apartments or our houses and, especially when it comes to big cities like Melbourne or Brisbane, it's where you went to school. They've got all their social groups, and to break into one of those groups when you're a bit older and you're single, it's not easy. And that's why there's so many lonely people out there. Is people just don't say, "Hey, you want to go for a beer? Do you want to, make a friend?" It's not easy, and friendships take time to build. And if you're not mentally, I always missed my home, which was Canada. But at
Yeah.
some point, I thought I could go back, and then at some point, I lost hope of going back, but I hadn't fully embraced living here. So it's like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I even? I don't have any family. I don't have any friends. Yeah, I just felt hopeless. I tell you, one thing that did help me out was a counselor, because the cat team used to come to my house every day.
Thing I was going to ask you, did you reach out for any support through this difficult time?
I had to go to the Alfred,
Yeah.
and then they put me onto the cat team, and it's an incredible service. They used to come at 9 o'clock in the morning. There could be 2 to 4 counsellors, and then they'd come again at 5 o'clock and give me some sleeping pills so I wouldn't because I didn't want to go into hospital, but they'd make sure I'd go to sleep when they were there, and by the time I was coming to, they were knocking on my door. So I couldn't hurt myself at night. And I just remember an Irish bloke that I told my story to, and this first guy that just said, "That's fucking shit." I just wanted acknowledgement that it was a shit hand of cards. That's it. And he said, "It's just shit. There's nothing about it that's shit." And then he asked me, "What do you miss most?" And I said, I had dogs for 14 years and I had to say goodbye to them. Like, that just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And they only passed away about a year or two after I got here. My ex-wife called and said, "I'd just let you know that Coco died," and then Jesse died shortly after. And he goes, "Why haven't you got yourself a dog?" And I said, "I don't know whether I'm going to live here or go there, and it's hard to shift them." And he said, "Just go get one. Go get a dog." And, I went and got a dog the next week. And yeah, it was a massive help to me mentally. Massive. It did so many things. One, it gave me companionship. It
Yeah.
gave me a reason to get up, gave me a reason to go for a walk. I started meeting people in the park just because, you do when you've got dogs. Yeah, it was really a turning point when I got my dog.
Oh, wow. Yeah. When we were going through COVID, we were talking online. I think it was because I'm an ambassador for the Fearless PTSD organisation. And there was a girl from a farm and they were talking about lack of connection and loneliness. And she was saying that for, some people out in the country, all they have is their dog. Dog is the thing that actually keeps them alive.
Yeah.
Having a dog for 20 minutes has a massive mental health benefits. I'm
Got
so
to-
glad that you got your dog, Tim.
Yeah, she's over there on the couch. And I got another one about 3 years ago. I rescued one off Gumtree. So this is Matilda.
Oh, beautiful.
And she was supposed to be a therapy dog, but she's going blind, and she was only 1 when I got her. And the family just said that they couldn't keep her because they had 2 kids that, like, as she loses sight, they'll need things adjusted in the house. So I would have 50 dogs if I could. I love them. Yeah.
So, Tim, after you tried to end your life and you were sitting down, you said crying, just thinking about, the what's next.
Mm.
Obviously, to get back up, you've got to put one foot in front of the other. There's been many times in your life, hasn't there, where you have had to get back up again?
Oh, that's what life is about. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate. It's not just a steady, there's a few people that have steady that goes along, but life's hard. It is struggling. It doesn't always go to plan, especially today. Relationships, friendships, work relationships, work, money. There's a lot of stresses of today. So you're constantly picking yourself up, especially if you've got a personality that you risk a lot of things, whether it's people or your career or places or money or investment. You are picking yourself up. And it's a long process. It's not just snap out of it. Now, I think that was my biggest thing with my father is, his thing was just snap out. That old school thing of just snapping out of it. It's shit advice because you need the validation that your problems are bigger than just snapping out of it. You're just not 15 that you just broke up with your girlfriend and, you've been sad for a week. Just snap out of it. It's a lot more when you get older. And snapping out of it is shit advice. You've got to walk out of it one foot at a time. And it may take a month, it may take 6 months, it may take 2 years, it may take 5 years. As long as you're putting one foot in front of the other and try not to go backwards. But it's okay if you do go backwards. Just realize that you are going backwards and it's okay. Everything's okay.
And they're just awesome words especially for all the guys out there that are listening today, or anybody that's listening. And I love that saying. I don't know whether you've heard it. If you're going through hell, don't stop.
Yeah, I say if you're going through a storm, don't stop. Yeah. So
Yeah, and you've got a couple of mantras which I want you to share at the end. I want to talk about this. So you've gone from one extreme of wanting to give up on life, realizing I've just got to put one step in front of the other and walk forward, and chucked yourself on a national television show, Married at First Sight.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
talk about from one end of the spectrum to the other.
It was ironic that when I made that decision, like essentially with the dog, I had no money as well. I was still struggling. And then the next week I ended up selling a big house and I had enough money just to not do anything for 3 months and get myself mentally okay. And then fast forward, year or two later, I remember my camera guy said, "Oh, you should apply for this show." And I applied and they called me. And then I said, it wasn't the right time. And then they called me every year for the next 4 years and just said,
really?
"How are you doing this year?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And then I met somebody and then I'd cancel. Then it went ahead. But that was also very stressful because they had a part of the show, part of the contract or everything was once you get down to, you're really getting down to the end, then the contract comes out and says, "Have you had any problems with the law or been in jail or anything like this?"
Oh, yeah, that's
So 48-page contract, and that would have been on about page 14 to 18. And then the first part was how much you're going to be paid. And I looked at the pay and it was $150 a day.
No way.
And it could be up to 18 hours of filming. So you're not even making $10 an hour.
You'd be better off in Woolies, wouldn't you?
Oh, you don't do it. Trust me, you don't do it for the money. So I took everything as a little bit of a joke.
Okay, yeah. Was this you just needed some lighthearted reprieve and wanted something different?
All I said is, okay, you're paying me $150 a day. I'm going to give you $150 worth of information. It was a cat. And so you get my name, my address, and how old I am. Other than that, you got to find the rest of the information out. And so I kept this big secret all through filming because then come day after the Bucks party that we had the day at Channel 9 where there was a 9-hour orientation day, or it's 8 hours. And then they have PR comes in, then somebody else comes in, then legal comes in, and they go through it all going, "Don't mess with our show. It's our biggest money earner, blah, blah, blah." I'm sitting there going, I hadn't bullshitted on the form, but you don't need to know everything about me. I'm a nice guy, so I'll figure it out. And then they kept asking for police checks. Where have you lived before? And then I remember saying to a mate, they're gonna get me on this one. They've asked for an international police check. It turns out they'd only asked for a Canadian one. They
Yeah.
just didn't have the right questions because they said, which countries have you lived in? I never considered myself living in the US. I was detained in the US. It's not like you get captured in Somalia and you go, oh, I'll always put that I lived in Somalia, kidnapped for 2 years. I just said, I was passing through the US and stayed a long time, but I wasn't living there. It was very funny to get through that whole show and nobody find out. Yeah.
From a watching point of view, what seemed to happen was your partner seemed to press you a lot about emotions.
Look,
Was that
I'm
scripted as well? Or
I'm gonna. It's a year and a half later, and unfortunately, some people get a very good at it when it comes to being emotionally intelligent. Let's say that. I don't wish anyone any diswill, but
yeah, no, yeah.
I definitely don't. But there's certain parts of it. If you're so emotionally intelligent, then why lack it? You're a big part of the problem. And it's these fake, phony people that people look up to that really need to, and I'm not saying every part of it is, but I mean to say, if you do what you do, practice what you preach, and this is the part of society. It's kind of like when you came back to my place, and I remember listening to saying, oh, it was very small and it was uninspiring. Yeah, I don't have to impress anyone. I own it. You don't know what I've gone through, and it's my home. It's a place I feel safe. But you live in a car, but we didn't show that. But the other thing is, don't criticize anyone on how they live or where they live because you don't know their backstory, except for people where they stand and what you see in front of you. And if you're going to be the mecca of emotional intelligence, then really practice it. Don't be this way here and this way over here.
I wasn't fooled, Tim, because you were actually one of my favourites on that show.
Thanks.
Because I could see through all the bull crap, and what I saw was a real guy. And I loved that. A real guy who had been through life struggles. Yeah, I'd lost both my parents, I was watching you, and I'd lost both my parents. And I know how hard that is, and to be kind of pumped on national television to talk about your feelings and stuff like that. In a world where, social media says to men, puts this portrayal up of what the great macho guy looks like, that they don't talk about feelings, that it's all bull dust, isn't it? And like you said before, it's good to talk up and talk about how you feel. It's healthy.
It is. It's just it's
the right context and on the right.
It's very hard to take advice from somebody that's not a professional, and two, if you've never experienced anything, any hardships, loss, if you've always had that parachute under you, that's great. I'm not taking that away at all. But then don't saddle yourself up to somebody like me and think you're going to show me something and not learn it, not the other way. Instead of pointing the finger and dictating to, it's why we've got two ears and one mouth. Sometimes it's better off to shut this and open these up, be the smartest person in the room. Because when it comes to emotional intelligence, I'm not saying I'm extraordinary, but if we're going to stack each other up against each other, you should have actually opened your ears a little more and shut your mouth a little more, and you mostly would have learned something. But you got a good at it, so happy days.
No, well, you got a good at it in my eyes.
I actually do think I did all right, and I but I'm also I watched some of the cast of this year hating production and hating, they said everyone's manipulated. Well, here's the difference: is I own a part of a gin distillery. I did own. Is when I got on the set or got at the hotel, I called the factory down here and said, "Hey, can you send me up 13 cases of gin and whiskey and all different types of stuff?" And I handed that out to every single production staff, cameraman, sound audio, everybody. Everybody always had a gift from me, no matter where they were, no matter who they worked for.
Aww.
From there to the front desk, the people that were working at Sky Suites, everyone knew me, everyone was nice to me, and I was nice to everybody. So, yeah.
And I guess, it served a purpose in your life at the time, didn't it? Because something that's vital to be able to move on from, well, I don't know if when we've been really hit by vicarious trauma, it's hard to actually, you changed as a person. But to be able to move forward, there's two things I think that are needed, and that's one is connection and two is a purpose.
Yeah.
And if it didn't do anything else for you, it was a purpose for you at the time, wasn't it?
It was a great experience. Two of my close friends, which are Jono and Tristan. It was a great experience.
Oh.
It's something. It's wild after you've done it. And I played cat and mouse with a huge secret as well. So it was definitely a positive experience. There's no question there. Dangerous because if you don't get a good at it, it can play hell. Because people actually believe that these shows are real. And I think I said to you, doesn't matter whether it's Married at First Sight, Farmer Wants a Wife, Survivor, SAS, Honeymoon, all of them, they're all the same. The shows are not designed for people to meet somebody. The show's not designed for somebody to get through. Big Brother, it's all just personalities. And your personality, you become a character. So all they do is they have a structure of a show and then they stick 24 people that normally wouldn't speak to each other in and see what happens. And that's all it is. And that's why you like some people, you hate some people, because we've all gone to a barbecue or a dinner party and sat there and thought, oh, that guy's a cockhead. I'd never go, I wouldn't have him at my party. But you meet people that you can't stand. Well, then try living with them for 12 weeks. And of course, you're going to be on edge. Of course, things are going to come out. But it's no different than prison. I actually found prison easier than Married at First Sight.
Wow. Gee, that's ironic. Tim, what's your self-care strategies today to keep your mental health well? And I know that you've got your dogs. What else have you got in your life and what's part of your routine for anyone out there that's struggling with their mental health?
Exercise. I'm 53 now. You gotta get your heart rate up. You gotta do exercise. And if you are living in a built-up area, or if you live it's always good to get out and do something different. I live right in the heart of Melbourne, and I love just getting in my car and going out to the country. And if I was in the country, sometimes it's good just to go to the city and people watch. But just I've learned to live be comfortable in myself. Understand that I need some time for me. I try and listen to positive things. I've got a new sort of series coming out. Just when you listen to different music, like especially from the 80s, and your first memory, because if I listen to 80s music, so many good memories come up, and I just it's like, hey, when I listened to that song, I was washing dishes at Sizzler, and some of the greatest parties we had was when I was making $4.85 an hour. Put on my blue suede shoes. I remember when I got on. Everything was exciting when you were young. Try and tap back into, life doesn't have to be over. And that's where applying for a reality show over 50. I was one of the oldest contestants. And even today, I do things that I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing. I want to keep experiencing things because you don't want to get to the end and still have dreams. You want to get to the end of your life and have stories. Don't be sitting in that rocking chair at the nursing home in that circle and saying, I wish I had have done this. My grandfather died with a saying. He wanted to go to the Kakadu and a Jackaroo. They don't make a Jackaroo anymore. That was a Mitsubishi. He goes, son, I want to go to the Kakadu and a Jackaroo. He never left Central Queensland.
Oh.
He only moved 15 Ks from where he was born to this other small town. Don't be that person sitting around going, I wish, because we're all going to head to the same place. Doesn't matter whether you're Steve Jobs, whoever, the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, we're all going to end up in the ground. Be the one with memories.
I love that. Tim, what are a couple of your mantras? I had them written down, but it'd be better if you just share them.
Be good to yourself and be good to each other. Just be a good person. Give more than you can get. Give more than you get. There's no harm. And one thing that we don't do, a lot of people don't do, is give other people compliments. Just, how hard it is as you get older, just to, even a stranger, even just to say, oh, you look good, or, not in a bad way. I hope you're doing well. I walked past a girl the other day that was sitting there having a sandwich and going, sandwich looks great. You look great. I hope you're enjoying the sun. And it was just from her not smiling to smiling. And I went into my building, came back, and turns out she didn't know. She didn't know me, but she recognized me. And yeah, you just make a new friend. And it was just, she goes, "Hey, thanks very much. I was having a shitty day."
Oh, words are powerful, aren't they?
Just, it doesn't take anything. It would just it'd make it so much easier if people would just be a little bit nicer.
Tim, as we close, what's your message for the world?
We only get one life. We only get one shot at it. If you've never lost anyone, you're lucky. And if you have, learn from it. Because in that box, you don't get to take anything with you. So make sure you leave it all on the table here.
Tim, it's been an absolute delight to talk with you today, and thank you so much for sharing your inspiration and hope with us.
No worries. Be good to yourself, be good to each other.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for listening to Stories of Hope with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leaving a rating and review on your podcast player. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find her next event. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode. And remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.